Hey everybody, it's Eric Balance coming to you with the Resilient Minds podcast, where I feature beautiful entrepreneurs, thought leaders, and experts in their field, where they help us discover their X factor, their experience of life, only to discover how they were able to accomplish and find out their why factor, their big why, their purpose in life. So join me as we get to discover the beauty of our minds and how can we really continue to go after the biggest and most wildest dreams while we continue to pursue and manifest our greatest intelligence that comes from the heart. See you on the show.
Welcome everybody to the Resilient Minds podcast. I'm very grateful today to welcome Dr. John Demartini. Welcome to the show. It's great to have you. Very blessed to connect with you. I'm really looking forward to our time together.
Well, thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to be with you.
So for those of you that don't know Dr. Demartini, I really want to share just a little bit about Dr. John. Like, honestly, for those of you that haven't spent time or heard, if you go to is it Demartini.com you mentioned?
Yes, so drdemartini.com.
There you go, drdemartini.com. And so for those of you, like, this man is a world-leading human behavior specialist, researcher, best-selling author, educator, and founder of the Demartini method, which I'm certain we'll get a little bit into that. Very revolutionary in modern psychology. He's been a wisdom keeper and has authored 40 books that have been translated into 39 different languages, and has presented his insights alongside some of the most influential people like Sir Richard Branson, Deepak Chopra, and many others. Dr. Demartini's cutting edge methods are really, as I said, wisdom keeping of his own for the last 5 decades of research disciplines like physics, philosophy, theology, metaphysics, astronomy, mathematics, neurology, physiology, which is, I'm getting into it right now, right? So he has synthesized these teachings and really incorporated the capacity of really all of them into the human values that we are all really so beautifully capable of reaching. And I think that, as you share this in your own life, your own business, and you apply this into the financial relationship and leadership strategies that you work with people from all over the globe, Dr. Demartini, I think this is something that you continue to pass on to, young students like myself, enabling us to transform our lives, and so we can pass on these great gifts and values of the highest capacity moving forward. So with that all and all that amazing stuff, I just want to say thank you once again for being here, and I'm looking forward to really dive deep with you and uncover the magic of what's within.
Well, thank you for again and inviting me to be here, and I look forward to this interview. Thank you.
Beautiful. So I always talk about within the show, and it's been now almost 4 years where the first thing I ask is, like, we always had these experiences in our lives, and what's been those experiences that have contributed to the why. And so has there been the one first defining moment that has allowed you or really helped you recognize that you have to go deeper, or that you need to get more curious, or that you wanted to get to know more within yourself? And if there was, I would love it if you can go back all the way to that moment.
Well, I don't know if I have it exactly the way you've asked, but
it's okay.
I had a really, really amazing moment in my life at age 17. I was living in Hawaii on the North Shore, and I was a long-haired hippie surfer. And I nearly died on a surfing situation. And that led me to a health food store, which led me to a yoga class, which led me to a guest speaker at a yoga class, who is named Paul C. Bragg.
Paul C. Bragg?
From Bragg's amino acids and Bragg's nutritional supplements, all this nutritional ideas. And he, in that one night, in 1 hour, with one message, impacted me profoundly. Up until that time, I had learning challenges. I had to go to a speech pathologist even when I was a child, but 1.5 years old, because I couldn't pronounce and use my mouth properly. I was told by the time I got to elementary school that I would never be able to read or write or communicate effectively. I only made it through elementary school by asking the smart kids questions the best I could with my speech. And I eventually dropped out, was a street kid by 13, and took up surfing and hitchhiked out to California and Mexico, and eventually I made it my way to Hawaii. And I assumed I was going to make surfboards and be a surfer at 17. That was my fate, I thought. But the night I met him, after him speaking, it made me believe that maybe I could overcome my learning problems and someday learn how to read and become intelligent. I didn't think that was going to ever happen.
Wow.
I had a yearning to want to be it because I didn't like being stupid. I had to ask some of the guys I surfed with to read things to me. Still a friend with one of those guys. But that night, the way he spoke, I felt he was talking to me. I'm sure everybody else felt the same way. But I had a dream that night, a vision that night, of standing in front of 1 million people and speaking appropriately, speaking clearly. I have that vision painted by a famous painter, sits in my office. And that was the day my trajectory changed. And the day that I decided I wanted to overcome my learning problems and learn how to read and speak properly and someday become intelligent. Well, that was, in November will be 51 years. That led me to try to go back to take a GED and get a high school equivalency. That led me to try to learn to read. And so I went to a dictionary and I started memorizing 30 words a day and writing them out 20 times, spelling them 20 times, pronouncing them 20 times. I made a methodical system of going to the dictionary, and I did 20 words a day, 30 words a day, pardon me, with the help of my mom testing me on those words and the pronunciation and meaning until my vocabulary grew enough to be able to go and finish school, start school. And by the end of 2 years, that's 20,000 words. So I just did that methodically like a machine until my vocabulary grew enough until I could read. And I just started, when you find out you can read when you didn't think you'd ever be able to, that's really inspiring. Because now you can take a whole life of an individual and in a short period of time, stand on that shoulder and just keep going. So I started living in books and reading every imaginable thing I could get my hands on and trying to synthesize that the best I could to be able to make some sort of a body of knowledge that would be of value to somebody. And my teaching career began at 18. My first student asked me to assist them, which was really inspiring to have somebody ask me to help them. And I guess that's been my cornerstone of inspiration ever since. So I research every single day. I write every single day. And I do some form of speaking in webinars or seminars or keynotes or TV or radio or podcast every single day. And I write articles and books every single day. So I've been doing that for, this will be 51 years in November. And I don't have anything else I'd rather be doing than that. So that's what I love doing. And I wanted to, at the age of 18, I was sitting in front of I was in the lotus position, in a yoga position, sitting on this little sheet in my den at my parents' house. and we were watching Kung Fu with David Carradine. And he mentioned that he had a master, a Shaolin master, and they called him Grasshopper. And I thought, wow, I want to be a master. I want to be a master of my life. I didn't know what that really meant, but it just sounded cool. You know, it sounds cool to be a master. So I then went on a pursuit to ask what would it entail to be a master of life? What would that look like? And I broke life into 7 areas from a little bit of research. And I wanted to awaken original ideas that served human beings, create original ideas that serve humanity. I wanted to synthesize and stand on the shoulders of people and try to get the most broad and depth body of knowledge I could get my hands on in every field to find the most universal laws that I could build a body of knowledge with. And then I wanted to disseminate that to whoever would be willing to listen as a way of learning, because I learned if I share it, I learn more. And also as a way of making a difference. So I wanted to create an original ideas that serve humanity. I wanted to create a global business of teaching, which I've been blessed to do. We have students in every country around the world today. I want to be financially independent, which I've been blessed to do many times a full. In sustainable fair exchange with exchanging with people through teaching. I want to have a global family, which I believe I have, because I live on a ship called the world that goes around the world, and we live globally. I wanted to have and meet amazing people who have done something that's been celebrated globally. And I bet 9,000 of those people, some of the greatest thinkers and greatest musicians and all kinds of people, because I wanted to make some sort of contribution worthy enough to be resonant with those people. And then I wanted to have a vital body that, you know, I'm 69 almost. And so I basically wanted to, you know, if I can make it to at least 100 doing teaching, that would be inspiring for me. So I'm working on that. And I also wanted to do something that was inspiring to people, you know, a movement of thought. I didn't want to follow some religious idea. I wanted to create a movement that anybody from any philosophical or theological background could appreciate, that it could contribute to their inspirational pursuit, their mission, their inspired mission. So that's how I defined it. And I wrote it out, and I've been writing and master planning my life and living by design since then, and doing my best to share what has worked with myself and now millions of other people with as many people as I can. So I love what I'm doing. I get to do this every single day. I've learned to delegate anything that requires extrinsic motivation. Anything that I need to be reminded, motivated, or incentivized to do, I delegate to somebody who doesn't need incentivizing. So they can go do what I am not inspired to do, nor qualified to do, or capable of doing, or mastered at. So I can do what I'm free to do, which is teach, research, and write and travel. So that's all I do. I'm pretty well useless outside that. I'm not much of I haven't driven a car in 33 years, more than 33 years. And I haven't cooked since I was 24. I've delegated everything really since my 20s, once I learned how important delegation was if you want to live an inspired life.
I love it. And we actually talked about that at the beginning, just before, you know, how it's important for us to be able to know how to communicate effectively, to be able to delegate, and to be able to pass on this intelligence. And so it's fascinating to me to be able to hear and say, hey, like, you were at the beginning unable to really express yourself, and here you are now. That's really the focal point of what you do, is express yourself. And so interesting contrast, you know, illuminated through our, you know, pain. And, you know, we don't choose to suffer. We choose to kind of work through it and find that intelligence, because we inherently always had it. And we just need to kind of remind ourselves or uncover the wisdom that comes through from that space. And so, you know, You mentioned your mom at a very young age, which is really, like, for me, beautiful to hear. What was that relationship like with your mother, with your parents? Because, I know that, that could be a very good driver of also, influencing oneself.
Well, I had pretty cool parents, I thought. My sister has a slightly different view about it. I don't know exactly how she came to that conclusion, but it's not uncommon in families. But I thought my parents were pretty amazing. When they saw that I had problems with learning, my dad figured he was going to try to make me street smart, because he thought I may, end up have to be an entrepreneur to do anything, because I'm not likely to be academic. So he did something that not everybody got the opportunity to have. When I was 9 years old, I went to my dad and I said, "Dad, I want to buy a baseball, a glove, and a bat." And he said, "Fantastic." He said, "So what are you saying?" And I said, "Well, I want to earn some money to be able to do that." He said, "Well, have you mowed the yard?" "Yes." "Have you edged the sidewalk and driveway?" "Yes." "Have you clipped the hedges?" "Yes." "Have you done all the flower beds?" "Yes." "Have you tightened up the shale on the side?" "Yes." "You cleaned my shoes and polished my shoes?" "Yes." "You cleaned your room?" Have you done everything that I asked you to do that's I can charge you for or pay you for?" And I said, "Yes." He said, "Well, son, I don't have anything else. I can't pay you without service, because that's not how the real world works. So you're going to have to go to the neighbors." And I said, "Okay." So I went to the neighbors. I walked down a couple doors down, and there was a yard that was kind of unruly. And so I knocked on the door and I said, "I would like to know if you would like your yard mowed and edged and cleaned and clipped and flower bedded," because I knew how to do that. My dad taught me and my mom taught me how to do all those things. And that was my responsibility. So the lady said, "Well, okay, how much?" And I had no idea. I wasn't even expecting a yes. So I pulled out a number out of the air and she said yes. So I started to do her yard. I got bee stung and I got blisters and I got sunburn and all the basic stuff that goes with it. But I made some money. And I went back and bought a glove and a bat and ball. And my dad, I came back and he saw me with that ball and bat, and I wanted to play with him. I wanted him to come out and throw the ball with me. He said, "Where did you get the ball and the bat and glove?" I said, "I did what you said. I went to the neighbors and I started doing the yards and stuff." And he said, "What equipment did you use?" I said, "Well, equipment in the garage." He said, "I have to teach you about the real world, son. There's a depreciation cost on that equipment. Let me calculate what it is and I'll tell you what you owe me." And I said, "Well, I spent all the money." He said, "Well, that'll teach you that you have to pay your portion." And I said, "Oh," which eroded my exhilaration and profits. So I owed him $7.50. And so I had to do 3 more jobs to make enough money to pay the next amount that I paid him, plus that amount to pay it off. But I was current. Now I knew what was my expectations. So I had to pay him off. And one day I was mowing the yard and this kid came by on his bicycle and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm mowing the yard." "Cool." I said, "How would you like to make a little money?" And he goes, "Well, sure." I said, "I'll pay you 50 cents if you push this lawnmower around and mow the yard." So I showed him how to do it. And I got another guy to do the edging, because I figured if I can go out and talk to people and close the deals and I can get people to do it, then it would make it more functional. I can get a little bit more profit, pay my dad, pay everybody off, and still make something. So I ended up getting 3 groups of 3 guys. And I got the Zubrads and the Malas equipment. They called my dad and said, "How much you charging him?" And they charged me the same. So at least I had a set fee. And I would do all these neighbors' yards. It was summertime. I did all these yards. We worked all day. And I ended up collecting, after paying everybody off, $45, which is equivalent of about $600 a day today. So if you have a 9-year-old making $600 a day, that's not bad. Yeah. So I was making pretty good money at the time. And I bought me a bicycle, a buzz bike from Western Auto. I bought me, all the sport equipment I wanted. And I bought this and that. And my dad said, he said, son, are you saving any portion of your money? I said, well, no. He said, you're not going to ever get ahead. You'll be working your whole life for money if you never save a portion of it and invest it. He said, so I'm going to get you a coin collection set. So he bought me this little blue folding coin collection set so I could put my pennies, nickels, and dimes and quarters in there, 50-cent pieces and dollars. And that was a gift he gave me, those, to get me to save, to start thinking savings. And then he said, I'm also giving you a piggy bank. Now, that piggy bank was a very metallic, very strong, you could throw it on the ground, you couldn't break it, piggy bank. It was like a real safe. It was a safe. And every time I had extra money, it was going in that safe. He never gave me the way of opening it. Since 1963, in my office in Houston, Texas, on the 52nd floor of Williams Tower, is that piggy bank since 1963, never been opened. The same coins are in that thing since 1963.
Wow.
Because I never, one, could open it, and two, I didn't want to open it. It was a metaphor for thinking long term. It was a metaphor. Now, after I started doing the savings and taking a portion of savings, because that was inspiring to me to be able to do that, he said, now I'm going to teach you what it's like to be free. I said, what's that? I knew every time he talked to me, it was usually costing me something. He said, I'm going to teach you what it is to be free. I'm going to start charging you from clothing, food, and rent to live at the house. So he charged me $7.50 a week for clothing, food, and rent. And he said, now you bought your freedom.
So keep going with the $750 per week, right? For the rent.
Yeah. So I started writing. I started to go, and I wanted to travel, so I wanted to be free. I forgot to say that I had to wear braces on my arm and leg when I was a child too, because I had a deformed arm and leg. So when I got out of the braces, I just wanted to be free and go places. So the second I got my bicycle, I started riding 35 miles. At the halfway part, I turn around and race back home and get home by 9 o'clock. And each day that I was out, if I wasn't working, I was out traveling and going different directions and exploring. By the time I was 12, I was hopping trains from different cities and or riding my bicycle long distance. And by the time I was 13, I was hitchhiking from our new place to Houston, back to Houston. And by the time I was 14, I hitchhiked across America and down into Mexico, snuck into Mexico illegally and got back out of Mexico illegally. Didn't have a wall from Trump by that time. And by the time I was 15, I moved to Hawaii. So I was independent from age 13 and really from 9, but from 13, I learned how to be independent. So I was sort of a street kid. And all I wanted to do is, I wasn't going to make it in school. So I dropped out of school and I wanted to go surfing because I was pretty good at surfing. And so Texas wasn't the surf capital. So I went to California and Hawaii, and I lived on the North Shore and surfed the North Shore and got into some surf movies and surf magazines and surf things and did pretty good. I was in the second tier surfing in those days.
So I'm hearing like you really had an amazing knack at, finding solutions, and empowering other people to really step into to leadership roles and getting, the ability to delegate at a very young age. Like there was a unique presence already within you that you had the capacity to cultivate your communicative abilities. And so then as you were actually in Hawaii, that's when you started to learn more about like reading and intelligence and this like capacity to learn from other things. But what I'm hearing is that already there was so many solutions or so much solution oriented perspectives at like a very young age. And so this is a fascinating awareness, I think, because that's inherently was always with you already.
Well, my dad, I think, because my dad made me accountable. See, if you're not if you're not filling your day with challenges that inspire you, that solve problems, that serve, I don't know if you're really going to awaken the genius that sits dormant inside waiting to surface.
And
My
this
dad
is where
gave me the challenge.
but this is exactly what I'm suggesting is like, I think that because at the beginning you said like you felt stupid, but yet you were already brilliant. And that was the thing is like, you know, it's so fascinating, like as you're telling the story now, that at that time you actually thought that you were not intelligent, but yet now we can look back at that point and see how you were already like aware of the genius and you were utilizing the genius. And your father, of course, your parents were able to create that type of environment for you to find the solutions necessary. So how do you feel that today, like when it comes to this type of, especially like during the time that we're spending with our parents or, you know, the next generation that continues to grow up as parents? I'm not a parent yet, but I can't wait to be a dad. So like, what is the responsible roles that we must as parents really step into to empower our children to find these solutions versus disempowering them and helping them focus on the problems because it's something that is within us? I'm just curious your perspective on this.
Well, I think maximum growth and development occurs at the border of support and challenge. If you overprotect and oversupport, you can make them juvenilely dependent. And they'll probably work for other people for security. If you over-challenge them, they'll become precociously independent and feel unstable. But if you put a blend of those, and most parents in their combination do a little of both. You know, one's usually the overprotector, one's usually over the challenger, and relative to each other. Very few parents are exactly the same level of support and challenge, but sometimes that occurs.
I was very blessed.
And yeah, and so I think that the challenges that I was blessed to have makes you have to come up with solutions. You become solution oriented by challenge, and you become problem oriented by support. People that are over, you know, there's an interesting thing about money. And I just did a presentation on this the other day. If you are overly generous to somebody and rob them of dignity, accountability, and productivity, at first, if you take care of their problems, they may be appreciative, but eventually they'll just accept it. And then they'll start to expect it. And then they'll become entitled. And then they'll become dependent. And then they'll become, you know, aggressive if you say no. And they'll get literally angry and resentful if you don't rescue them because now they're dependent on you. So supporting somebody without accountability can rob them of their magnificence. And we sometimes accolade this idea of generosity, but I really believe that sustainable, fair exchange is the key. Not giving something for nothing, not trying to get something for nothing, but having sustainable, fair exchange where you have equity and a fair exchange. We innately, intuitively know how to go to that. It's built in. And when somebody gives us something for nothing or gets something for nothing, that altruistic or narcissistic polarity eventually creates a non-sustainability as a feedback to get it back to sustainable, fair exchange. And I think that my dad was blessed to have that knowledge and try to impart that in a way that I didn't always appreciate at the time. I mean, I can look back now and I go, wow, that was an amazing gift because not everybody got that. But solving problems and giving me accountabilities and believing I could do it. When I was 3 going on 4, my dad owned a plumbing business. He wasn't a plumber, he was an engineer, but he owned the plumbing business, had plumbers working for him. And so he brought me back when I was just 3.5 to 4. And this was around 1959, I guess, 59, 60. And he said, you see this room right here? there are thousands of nipples and couplings and elbows and various plumbing parts. Your job is to organize that and make it organized. So every time somebody drops some off, everything's put away. Every time somebody pulls things out, they come to you, and you're going to do an inventory and keep inventory on this. And I'm saying it in more modern language today, but my dad put it in simple words in those days. I'm 3.5, 4 years old. So he says, you're going to be responsible for that. And here's a brush, a metallic brush. Anywhere where there's rust, you're going to keep each one of those nipples and things. You're going to brush it, make sure there's no rust, and oil it, make sure there's no rust on it, to make sure that's a usable nipple so we don't have a depreciation of products. So I was given that at 4, and I was very inspired. I felt like I was important by doing that, that I was actually cleaning, because the trucks would come in and they'd have all this loose stuff they just throw in the back of the truck. And I would grab all that stuff, rinse them off if there was mud on them, oil them, brush them and oil them, and put them appropriately away. And I put together an inventory system when I was 4 years old that was, you know, I went to my dad's plumbing business about 2 months ago, 2.5 months ago, 2 months ago. The guy that bought it for my dad is a guy named Randy. And I went to see him because he wanted to give me the plaque from my dad from his office desk, because he's starting to retire. He's 70 and he's going to retire. And he wanted me to have the plaque from my dad's desk. And so he said, I want you to come by and pick that up. So I went there and we talked about it. And he told me that my father told him that my son is the one that organized that room. He's the one that created that room when he was just before 4 years old. So my dad gave me challenges and accountabilities that would be considered a bit out of line today. You know what I'm saying? You don't, child labor issues, or who knows, God knows what that is. But to a young boy, it's like an opportunity to do something to, you know, to keep out of trouble. My dad knew that if I filled my day with meaningful things, I didn't get in trouble. I'm doing something productive. And every time a customer would come back, he would come back and say, I want you to meet my son. He runs the inventory thing. And son, he needs this particular piece. And he would write it on a piece of paper and the length. And I would take that piece of paper and measure the length and go and pick out that little nipple and everything else and hand it to the customer.
This is a lot of like, I have a few questions because this is really meaningful stuff. And this problem oriented by support, right? Like, I think that there's so much, especially when people are not held, like you said, without the accountability. I think, you know, like, it's like when people are, they become, like you said, I heard like the victims, they become victims of their own circumstance because they don't feel like they have any responsibilities. And so this comes back to you know, this essence where I think in what I hear is, do you think instead of sustainable, right, there's a focal point now where we can be way more regenerative in our energy, where we can actually step into these responsible roles as young men and women, and garner these meaningful, productive, and playful relationships with our children? Are you father or mother, or like, sorry, do you have children?
I have 3 children.
Amazing. So
Two daughters, two daughters and one son, 30, almost 30, well, 38, 35, and 32, almost the next age.
I love it. So, and you know, again, I'm not a father, I'm just like curious. So do you feel like this sustainability or like can foster into a regenerative approach where we empower our next generation to really take more of this like playful, meaningful, productive, responsible roles with the relationship? So instead of needing to actually foster a relationship where societal construct or things outside of us are being taught to us, there's something meaningful that's coming from an internal experience from the parents. And this value-based approach can be something that is really focused on creating more solutions and grounding really a compassionate leadership focal point, so that these leaders are like really nurtured through their relationships, because these parents have cultivated that awareness at such a young age, like your father has for you.
Well, I think, I don't know, I have no proof, I'm just speculating, that if I had been typical, I mean, I didn't have to wear braces and I had no learning problems. I mean, I was at a speech pathologist starting at 1.5 years old. So I couldn't pronounce, I couldn't spell, I couldn't write properly. I think that catalyzed him to put more emphasis on that and gave me those accountabilities to try to give me street smarts. And had I not had those challenges, I probably would have just been just like the average kid, just going to school, do the things, and, you know, had a different path. Mm-hmm. So I remember when when I was 7, my dad said something to my mom, and I think in front of my uncle and aunt. They said, well, there's the thing called formative years. That was in the 1950s, there was a thing called formative years. The Nobel Prize was given for the understanding of the formative years, the development of the brain. And my dad apparently learned something about that. And he says, you know, but if you do something within those first 7 years, you probably have a foundation that they're probably going to play on for the rest of their life. So I think he was really interested in giving me accountability because of the challenges that I had, to make it more likely I would survive out there in the world, do okay in the world. I don't think you know, when the teacher told my parents when I was in first grade that I'm afraid your son will never be able to read or write or communicate effectively, probably never go very far in life, won't probably amount to much. They didn't know any different. So they just went, okay, then we got to go to plan B. Let's make sure that he figures out how to, you know. My dad, I remember I was doing the hedges one day, and he said something that was gold, man. He said, I remember I did all the hedges in the front, and I was meticulous because my dad, because he had a plumbing business, had a level in the garage and had a string with 2 sticks with a rope to it to mark places. And so I literally took that string and put it on a tall stick and another on a shovel and put that thing. So I made sure that the hedges were absolutely just spotless. I probably spent way more time than ideal, but I wanted to make sure that that was like perfect. And I asked my dad when he came home that night, I said, how do you feel about the hedges? What do you think about the hedges? Did I do sufficiently enough? And he said something that was gold. He said, son, it's not a matter of my opinion. It's your opinion. Do you feel you've done your greatest? Do you feel you've done the best job you possibly can do? And I said, yes. He said, that's what counts. Don't rely on other people's opinions. Rely on yourself. That's gold.
Beautiful. Beautiful. That's an essence, like in trusting thyself, you know, and this is really something so.
Oh, well, I said on the movie The Secret, when the voice and the vision on the inside is louder than all opinions on the outside, you begun to master your life.
That's it. That's it. And you know, I think that this is when we start to become, like you said, at such an early at the beginning, right? What do we need to do to become the masters of our life? And it's like, boom, you know, you had it at that point. Your father gave you that lesson in that moment, right? And this is such a fascinating thing, because I think that so many of us are not or have not been. We were curious enough to go and find it, but like, I think that how can we do more of that empowerment for the next generation is my curiosity. And I, you know, because I'd love to get into the Institute and what you're doing there and how that's kind of manifesting, because I'm certain that you're doing a lot of that. So tell us, like, you know, I would love to know a little bit deeper of how you're manifesting that awareness even more. You know, I know you've done 40 books, you've been doing this for 5 decades. So how can we continue to, instead of sustain it, to regenerate it into a place where we're really enhancing that meaningful mechanism of self-trust?
Exemplification. Einstein said the greatest teacher is exemplification. Concentrate. You know, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but he's a grand slammer in tennis. I was watching a video on him, and he was talking about how much he got clear on how he wanted it and designed his life and created it. And Phelps the same way. He saw it in his mind's eye. I think getting clear about how you want your life to look, designing it, and then exemplifying that is more inspiring than any words you give. When I was 4, I used to take neighborhood kids on bold journeys. We called them the Bold Journey. That was the title. And it was usually, I mean, it was at least one day a week and sometimes more than one day a week. And they would come to my house, my parents' house, all different ages. They were even up to about 10, 11 years old. And I knew all the fences, all the bushes, all the trees in the neighborhood, because I did all the landscaping. So I knew every flower bed, every bush, every tree. I mean, I knew it. I was literally going door to door. I said, you know, everybody on the street's using my service except you now. I want to make sure I get in the street. And so I knew. And so at night when it would be dark, I knew where little cubby holes and where scary dogs would bark. And I mean, I knew pretty well what was going down in that. And I would take people, and they had to follow me, climbing fences, walking on fences, holding onto trees, going in between bushes, going past scary dogs. And we would go on this bold journey. The kids loved it. And so my dad would encourage me to do those things when I was 4. He says he's training on how to be a leader. He's training me how to be a leader, to lead the kids. So I was leading kids even older than me. And my whole life's been that way. I've been leading people older than me. And leading them on bold journeys to help them. See, I didn't have fear because I had foresight, because I knew the grounds. Yeah. But they only had hindsight. So they would react, I would foresight it and proact. And it's because I had the opportunity to do the landscaping, I knew everything in the yards. And I knew all the flower beds. So I knew what bushes you could go underneath and where you could go around, and I had it in my head. So I would take people on wild journeys, and they had to conquer climbing fences and climbing trees and walking on fences with bushes and holding them on there, and do whatever I did, they had to do. And I would come up with creative things called the Bold Journey. And so foresight is what gives you the leadership. And most people are living by hindsight. And that's the executive function of the forebrain instead of the amygdala and the subcortical areas of the brain. And that's the difference between being driven from within and being externally affected from without. And most people are not building a culture, they're following a culture. And I had a choice between building a culture or following culture. I always wanted to build a culture. So I built a culture now.
I love it, man. It's really beautiful to pay attention to a beautiful mirror and recognize the wisdom that's coming through in such a deep place, from such a deep place. I'm really grateful that you did the work, for the last 50 years, and that you got curious as a young boy, and for your father. I'm curious a little bit about your mom.
My mom was amazing. She was a painter, an artist, a mystic, to balance out the engineering.
Of course. You have to. You have to. It's amazing.
You have to have, nature always provides complementary opposites,
That's right.
If people are saying, I want to find someone like myself, well, that would be to Twilight Zone. You probably, that's not what you want. You want somebody that complements it. And my mom was more the mystic. She was interested in exploring ancient civilizations. I mean, we had the Churchwoods is the land of Mu on our front coffee table. And she was interested in, a little bit more philosophical things. My dad studied philosophy, but he didn't think he could make a living out of it. And children very commonly live out vicariously the parents' repressions. So I became the kind of the mystic philosopher, traveler. I did what they never got around to do. When I was 14, I hitchhiked to California, and I picked up my surfboard and a few clothes that I went by my house, my parents' house. I wasn't living at home at the time, but I went by the house to pick up some stuff. And they gave me a ride. They said, instead of hitchhiking, we'll give you a ride to the freeway. And I remember waving goodbye to him and everything else. And a friend of my father's, who later became a patient of mine years later, said, I always thought your father was out of his mind to let you drop you off on a freeway and let you hitchhike to California and just go surfing. And he said, but now the way you turned out, I wished I'd dropped my kids off on the freeway. But what was interesting is I later found out when I went to visit his parents that he left New York when he was late 20s and started to take a bus, and he wanted to go to California. But he got stuck in Texas and had to get a job and ran out of money. And he got stuck in Texas and got a job, and that's where he met my mom. And then they moved to Houston, and he never made it to California. His entire life, he never went to California. So when I told him I'm going to California, I think, I'm speculating, that he was saying, go.
100%. Yeah.
So I was living vicariously, or he was living vicariously through my mission, my objectives. And he realized that, he didn't ever do that. So, which is quite interesting. But my mom had an art little house store, and did kilns and paintings, and had very creative people. And I used to go there and sometimes help her in the kilns. And she was the one that could take any word and tell you how to spell it. So that's why my mom is the one that helped me with learning how to speak the words, because she never had any high school education, but what she had was crossword puzzles. And she lived in crossword puzzles and knew more words. She says, if I'm not going to be intelligent, I'm going to learn how to do crossword puzzles so I can not embarrass your dad with my words. So I had a crossword puzzle mom who was artistic, who was pretty cool as a mom. So I can't complain. Like I said, my sister has a different view. I don't know. They must have handled her much differently. Sometimes they treat a guy different than a girl or whatever. And so I was gone, so I didn't get to see all the things they went through. But she had a different perspective. She thought, well, they were this and that. She had different terms for it. And I said, okay, if you say so. I can only say thank you for my parents.
They really are gifts. And I think too, I have sisters. I have an older and a younger sister as well. And I think everybody has their different way of communicating. And I think it's beautiful. And the contrast is so important. What I heard too about your mom is really was able to hold the space. She really created that safety and space for.
She said something to me when I was 18. When I tried to go back to college, and I took my first test in college, and I got a 27. You needed 72 to pass. Everybody's grade, I thought it was going to be alphabetical. So I looked at the top and I couldn't find my name. I still couldn't find my name. I couldn't find my name. It was posted outside at the school. And finally I looked at the bottom and it was down at 27. Everybody else was above 70. There I was down there. And I was so embarrassed, I ran to the car and sunk in the car. I didn't want to be seen because people were changing classes and some people were getting in and out of cars, and I didn't want to be seen because I was really distraught. And I drove home crying on the way home. And I laid down in a fetal position underneath this little Bible stand in my living room, sunken living room at my parents' house. And I was just sitting there going, my dream about being a teacher was temporarily shattered. And I thought, all I could hear is my first grade teacher in my head saying, he'll never be able to read or write or communicate, and my mouth thing never go very far in life. And I was doubting my capacity to learn. And my mom came home from shopping and she saw me on the living room. She said, son, what happened? What's wrong? She hadn't seen me cry in a long time. And I said, Mom, I blew the test. I needed a 72 to pass and I got a 27. I guess I'm dyslexic and I got the numbers backwards. And she paused. Then she said something that was gold. She said, son, whether you become a great teacher and philosopher and healer and travel the world like you dream, whether you go return to Hawaii and ride giant waves like you've done, or you return to the streets and panhandle as a bum, which you've also done, I want to let you know that your father and I are going to love you no matter what you do. Whatever you decide to do, we love you, son. Wow. My hand went into a fist. I looked up and I saw my vision. Now I'm going to show you something here. This is mind-blowing. If I can find it here. I looked up, my hand went into fist, and I looked up and I saw the vision that the night I met Paul Bragg, a vision of speaking in front of 1 million people on over a giant square up about 40 feet in the air from a building with an iconic building from every major city around the world. And it was painted by Andrew Tischler.
Wow.
It's a 5 foot by 4 foot painting.
Wow. Beautiful.
So that's what I saw at that moment. And I got up and I hugged my mom and I thanked her. And I said to myself, I'm going to master this thing called reading, studying, and learning. I'm going to master this thing called teaching and philosophy and healing. I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to travel whatever distance. I'm going to pay whatever price to give my service of love across this planet. I went in there and got my dictionary out, and that's when I started memorizing 30 words a day. And today, I've spoken in 194 countries.
Amazing, man. Legend. You're honestly living legend, my brother. And it's this just goes to show, you know, the power of faith and belief in oneself, the importance of our willing to really go after what we believe in. I think that this is something that most people are unaware of, and it's beautiful to have great leaders like yourself, so that we can, you know, sit on the shoulders of beautiful giants like yours, and really just continue to do the work, because it's our collective responsibility, and continuing to serve in this capacity is a beautiful thing. I really would love to, you know, I want to be really aware of the time. Go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I was just going to say that, remember, it was Michelangelo. They asked him, how on earth did you accomplish this? And they were accolading him. And he said, if you saw how much work I put in it, you wouldn't think it's that great.
Yeah. If
you're willing to do whatever it takes and just keep going and never stop, whatever's in your heart, it becomes your life. It's not anything special. It's simply just not stopping. That's it.
That's it. That's all it is. And thank you for saying this. This really means a lot. And I have a question. First, actually, before we go, like, If anybody wants to connect with you, what's the best place to connect with you? I mean, I'll post everything in the show notes, but is there anything that you want to share, or anything that you want to give to the guests that are listening? Please let us know.
They can find me at drdemartini.com.
Okay.
And there is something that they can do.
Yes.
On the website is a value determination process to help them determine what they are intrinsically inspired, spontaneously, and feeling called to do. It takes about 30 minutes of their time, and it's eye-opening. I would hope it's free, it's private, it's worth the time spent. Just determine your values, go on there and take a look and take advantage of all the education that's sitting on that website. It's an educational website.
Please go check it out. Please make sure you take the time. This is a gift, and to really go deeper within yourself. It'll be a really beautiful process. Dr. Demartini, honestly, I'd love one last question before we go. If you had 3 days left to live, what would you do?
Well, the only thing I really am great at is teach, research, write, travel, and I would do it with the people I love.
Bless your heart, my brother. I'm very grateful. Is there anything else you want to share?
No, whoever's out there, give yourself permission to shine, not shrink, to radiate, not gravitate. And the magnificence of who you are is far greater than any fantasies you may ever impose on yourself. So don't look and put people on pedestals or pits. Put them in your heart, have reflective awareness, and stay focused on what's the calling you feel. And just know that you have a service. Deliver it and watch the fulfillment.
Big love.
Hey everyone, and thank you so much for listening to the Resilient Minds. I hope you enjoyed the show. Please make sure to go comment and like and follow us on iTunes or Spotify, and please make sure that if you really love this, to share this episode, and make sure that you're inviting all your friends to like it as we continue to unfold what the beauty of our minds does. More importantly, how powerful our heart level of intelligence can be when we combine our heart and our brain together. And more importantly,
make sure you take the time to take a look at what we're doing at Balanced Media Ventures and how we can actually really support you in doubling your impact, your income, and your influence, and how you can bring your life's greatest vision into your purpose and create it from that level of reality. Talk to you soon.